So tonight is a night. Game 7 is upon us of the Stanley Cup Finals. Tonight will end the regular season with one team hoisting the Stanley Cup as the 2019 Stanley Cup champions. In today's video, we're going to preview this game as well as take a look at some previous Game 7 Stanley Cup Finals history. We'll get into all that coming up next. Welcome back to Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So here we are, Game 7 for the Stanley Cup going tonight, Boston versus St. Louis. Of course, the game will be held in Boston where they have home ice advantage. It's certainly going to be a very fun evening. One of these two teams will hoist the Stanley Cup to be your 2019 Stanley Cup champions. So first, we want to take a quick preview of this game, and then I also want to take a look at some Game 7 Stanley Cup Finals history as well to kind of help analyze what we might see go down tonight, what trends we might be looking at. First, let's recap how we got to this point and take a quick look at the recap here of the first 6 games of this series. Now, we've had a pretty back and forth series so far. We saw the series open up for the first 2 games in Boston with the Bruins winning Game 1 by a score of 4-2. The St. Louis Blues then rebounded in Game 2, winning a 3-2 overtime game, winning goal coming early in overtime from Carl Gunnarsson. Of course, we saw the Blues really storm out in overtime and really pin the Bruins in their own end and get the eventual winning goal here to tie things up, heading back to St. Louis for Games 3 and 4. Of course, Game 3 in St. Louis was the first time in a long time that they hosted a Stanley Cup Finals game. And of course, things did not go well for the Blues at all. The Bruins absolutely dominated with a 7-2 win. Jordan Binnington, for the first time in his career, was pulled. Jake Allen got to see a little bit of action for the first time in these playoffs. And the Bruins took a 2-1 series lead. But like always, Jordan Binnington and the Blues always seem to bounce back. Game 4, they came back at home with a 4-2 victory to get this thing tied up. Obviously, Jordan Binnington's record after rebounding from a loss here is absolutely impeccable. So he's going to need to do that again tonight after losing Game 6 here. But of course, Game 5, they went back to Boston. Then the St. Louis Blues, for the first time in the series, won back-to-back games with a very narrow 2-1 victory. Of course, they ended up with another victory on the road with a chance to go home in Game 6 and hoist the Stanley Cup in front of their very, very hungry fans that are dying for a championship there in St. Louis. But unfortunately, things did not go well again with a 5-1 win. We saw, at least one probably unlucky or bad goal on Binnington. He didn't have his best game. Things came up short. And now we're heading back to Boston for Game 7. Now, of course, the St. Louis Blues have pretty much been a road warrior team here for quite some time. Their record on the road has been absolutely impeccable. They seem to bounce back from loss as well. So they do have those things going for them here rather well. Now, of course, the big factor here in the Stanley Cup Finals is always goaltending. In the playoffs, you can ride a hot goaltender, and a weak goaltender can cost you some games as well. So let's take a look and compare here Jordan Binnington to Tuukka Rask and see how these two shape up in this series so far. Now, so far in this series, Tuukka Rask, in my opinion, has been the better goaltender. He's been more consistent, not just in this series, but the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. He's given the Bruins a chance to win every single night, whereas Binnington has been great, but he has had his off nights as well. We haven't really seen that out of Tuukka Rask. So far in 6 games in this series, he's faced 173 shots, stopped 160 of them, giving him a .925 save percentage, which is absolutely solid for the playoffs. Rask has been a wall back there for the Bruins and is a big part of why they are where they are. Jordan Binnington, on the other hand, has faced 172 shots in this final series, stopping 155 of them for a .901 save percentage. So obviously, that's not great. I mean, so far, Binnington has given up 17 goals, where Rask has given up 13. But if you look at the game-by-game breakdown that we just looked at here momentarily, obviously, there is a couple of games that really stood out as being kind of a bit of a stinker for the Blues, which really impact those numbers greatly. When you look at the Blues winning, they're able to keep the goals down. Obviously, Binnington's played better. So when Binnington's on, they have a much better chance to win. But if he's even off the slightest and gives up 1 or 2 extra goals that he should have had, then it's game over, and the Bruins will certainly have a much better chance to win. So they need Binnington now more than ever to have the game of his life to really have a chance to beat Tuukka Rask and the Boston Bruins. Now let's take a look at what I feel are the keys of the game, not just goaltending, but let's look at the entire overall keys of the game for each team to have the best chance to win. Now, special teams could very well play a major role tonight. Obviously, the Bruins' power play has been absolutely lethal. So for them, if they get those opportunities and they continue to be hot, that very well might win them the Stanley Cup. On the other hand, for the St. Louis Blues, if they can stay disciplined and stay out of the box, that could go a long ways to helping them win the Stanley Cup as well. Considering it's Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals, I fully suspect that the referees will have the whistle in their pocket most of the night. I really don't think we're going to see a whole heck of a lot of penalties, and if we do, it's more than likely going to try to be even. I know in some cases that kind of drives people a little bit crazy, but they really do try to let them play and let them settle things here, especially in a game of this magnitude. Now, the referees are going to be the same as we had in Game 6, and I thought they did an excellent job in that game. There was really no egregious calls, nothing that really stood out as being, a bad call or missed calls or whatever. For the most part, it was one of the better games officiated in this playoffs, so hopefully they can repeat that and not even realize they're there. The best thing for the refs is that they're not even noticeable and you don't want to have anything to talk about them. So hopefully that plays out well, but special teams will certainly be big here for either side. But if we end up with a case of very few power plays, and if they're pretty even in that respect, that will favor St. Louis here in my opinion. But if the Bruins take advantage, then it's going to go the other way. Now, of course, when it comes to team depth, the Boston Bruins appear happy to play 4 lines against anybody throughout these playoffs. Their bottom 6 lines have gotten just as much ice time, sometimes at least, against some of the other teams' top lines. So Bruce Cassidy is not afraid to roll 4 lines and keep going with it here, whereas the Blues seem to be a little bit reluctant to do that. For the most part, they've played more so a 3-line game, especially when you get that so-called third line that has Bozak on it. They quite often end up sitting sometimes and missing some shifts, so I would not be surprised to see the Blues continue that. The Bruins do have an advantage that way. All 4 lines have been playing at a higher level, in my opinion, so if this game goes into overtime or it keeps going deeper into the game, that very well could play a role as far as what's available, but it could also go the other way, because the Blues might have some rested players that it might be able to come up clutch for them when it matters most. But either way here, I do think that the Bruins' depth there could be in their factor to help them win. The first goal is absolutely enormous. It's huge in this series. It's huge in the Game 7s. When you look at Game 7 history, 69% of the games that have gone to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals have been won by the team that scored first. This is game number 17 in Stanley Cup Finals history for going to Game 7 here. So we had it happen 16 other times. 11 out of 16, the team that scored first went on to win, which, I mean, as we know in hockey in general, oftentimes the first goal is very important, but in this scenario, it's even that much more so. So the first goal tonight is going to be absolutely huge. And as I mentioned here previously, the goalie battle is going to have to be big as well. Tuukka Rask has been the better goalie in this series. I don't think anybody can really debate that. Binnington has had his moments, but he's had a couple of games where he hasn't been great. He, at the very least, needs to match Rask in order to have a chance for the Blues to win in this game. He does not have to necessarily stand on his head and absolutely outperform Rask, but they have to at least be even in that regard for the Blues to stand a chance. Binnington has showed a few cracks here and there, even though for the most part he looked like there really wasn't many cracks in his game, but it's been a long season for him now. He's played a ton of hockey since January. It's a big stage, a lot of pressure, and Rask has been a calm, cool, and collected here. Nothing seems to be getting to him. So if Binnington can match that and the goaltending battle can be pretty even, then St. Louis will have a chance. But if Binnington plays like he has in some of these other games where the Blues have lost, then there won't be much of a chance at all. The Bruins will take advantage of that, and they will hoist the Stanley Cup in their home arena for the Bruins fans to rejoice in this evening. Now let's take a look at some of the Game 7 history of the Stanley Cup Finals. I want to take a look at what's gone down in Game 7 since the year 2000 to see if we can find any trends on what we might be able to predict to happen tonight. So since the year 2000, like I said, this will be the 7th Game 7. The last one was in 2011, which featured the Boston Bruins again, where they went on the road in Vancouver and came up with a big 4-0 victory and won the Stanley Cup on the road. Now in 2009, we also saw the road team win with a 2-1 victory by the Pittsburgh Penguins over the Detroit Red Wings. In 2006, we saw the Edmonton Oilers go into Carolina and do battle with the Hurricanes. The home team came up victorious in that game, with the Canes winning 3-1. In 2004, we saw the home team win again, Tampa Bay beating the Calgary Flames by a 2-1 score. In 2003, we saw the New Jersey Devils shut out the Anaheim Ducks on home ice with a 3-0 victory. So, of course, that's 3 consecutive now at home. And, of course, in 2001, we go back one further. The home team again wins with a 3-1 victory by the Colorado Avalanche against the New Jersey Devils. So as you can see here, in the last 6 Game 7s, the home team have won 4-6, so they have a 4-2 record, where the road team, of course, has a 2-4 record, but the road teams are the ones to win the previous 2. And of course, as I mentioned, the St. Louis Blues have been a road warrior team here for quite some time, especially throughout these playoffs. They seem to do much better on the road than they do at home. I'm not sure exactly what it is. In their first round series against Winnipeg, they won 3 out of the 4 games, came in Winnipeg, which I would not have predicted before the series started. They've already won 2 out of 3 in Boston in this series, so they're certainly confident on the road. They're fearless that way. So therefore, I think the Blues certainly stand just as good a chance, and if after all this, I still think we're at a spot where it's really, really tough to predict who's going to win Game 7 tonight. The fact that they're on the road and all that experience, and with Tuukka Rask playing the well he has, it certainly does seem to favor the Boston Bruins. But like I said, when you look at Jordan Binnington's ability to bounce back, how well they've played on the road, all the big road wins they have in the 2019 Stanley Cup Playoffs, the fact in the last 2 Game 7 Stanley Cup Finals were won by the road team, it certainly gives them an edge as well. So it's really, really hard to pick. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. Who's winning the Game 7 tonight, and who's going to be hoisting the Stanley Cup as the 2019 Stanley Cup champions? Let me know your comments down below, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, subscribe for more content just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.